Hey guys, welcome to the Chicken Coop. My name is Sam, and for the first video on the channel, I really just wanted to kind of smash out the exact content that I want to do and the stuff that I've wanted to see for a while that just doesn't really exist from what I've seen. And that is Warhammer 40k competitive content focusing on Chaos Knights specifically. Because from what I've seen from the space, we've got quite a few faction specialists running around, but I haven't seen much content, if at all, for Chaos Knights, and it feels like every other week I'm seeing a post of someone asking, hey, is there any good resources for learning how to play Chaos Knights in a competitive sense? And I don't have an answer for it, so I decided I'm going to be the answer for it. So the video today, I'm going to go through and write up my Chaos Knights list that I'm taking to the Krootcon GT in Sydney this weekend, and just kind of explain my thought process as a competitive Knights player with a around 60% competitive win rate, just to kind of explain my thought process of what units I'm taking and why I'm taking them. And I can also quickly go into why I'm not taking other options that are pretty popular. So I'll quickly swap over to my desktop cam and we will bring up new recruit. So we've got our configuration here for Strike Force, so your standard competitive 2000 point battle. And I'm going to go to the characters. So Chaos Knights, the big major meta one you always see people taking is War Dog Spam, which is a War Dog Stalker, which is what you need. There's just an armor gel with the character keyword stapled to it. I personally am not a big fan of the War Dog Spam gameplay. It's just personal preference. I don't like playing the army that's whole thing is big giant robots and then not taking the big giant robots. And I personally have always found that in my list, a Stalker just kind of ends up being an objective jockey that just holds his enhancement and doesn't really do a whole lot, especially for the points. He's 155 base, but if you take Aura of Terror and stuff, he quickly bloats up to the same price as a Brigand, and you can just take better stuff at that points. So we'll start with the bread and butter big knight that you always see people taking, which is a Chaos Knight Rampager, who is the big melee boy that gets once per game advance and charge, and he gives our smaller dogs rerolls of 1 to hit in melee. He also gets sustain hits himself when he charges, and with the Pariah Nexus rules where you can now walk through walls, we don't have to worry about using Knights of Shade to necessarily get through buildings and setting up our charges and staging. So we'll take the Rampager. Panoply of Cursed Knights is usually the enhancement we'll see people taking on these guys, but for the list I'm testing, I'm actually taking Lord of Dread because it's recently got a points reduction, and if I can get it in melee in the first phase, or in the first or second turn after staging, he forces the enemy to battle shock at the start of the fight phase, which means I can turn off defensive stratagems when I charge with him, and it can also give me an opportunity to trigger stuff such as Terror Shades and gain wounds back on him if he's lost any getting to where he needs to go. And the other knight that I take, because I'm pretty funny, I take 2 big knights, is actually I take a Cerastus Lancer, which is expensive at 420, and he does come into the same points cost as a Rampager with Panoply of Cursed Knights. However, he lets you take another enhancement despite having that increased durability, and he has an always-on 4-up invulnerable save. He has 25 wounds, so he's tougher than a normal knight, and he also moves 14 inches, which is the same speed as a Carnivore's, so he doesn't get that once per game advance and charge like a Rampager, but he is just consistently faster every single turn, and we never have to spend anything for Demonic Bulwark, which is our version of Rotate Iron Shields, because he always just has a 4-up invuln save regardless. And I do take a Aura of Terror on him because I can usually stage him behind a building in our deployment zone, and that's big instant turn 1 sticky it, and then we just run him through the buildings, sticky middle field, sticky whatever objective I need to stage him near, and then just ram him straight into the opponent's backfield. And then that will sticky it, and that also gives out the Chaos Knight Aura, which is the -1 leadership and forcing battle shock checks if you are below starting strength at all. As for the other big knights, the Abominant, despite the points drops, he's still just not really worth it. There is some cheese lists running around where you're running 3 Abominants and stuff like that, which is, it's funny, but I don't feel it's competitively viable. And the same goes for the Desecrator, who I will bring up his profile. Does have our premier main anti-tank option, but the Laser Desecrator, from my experience, having only 3 shots, isn't pulling its weight 9 times out of 10. Well, not literally 9 times out of 10, but I feel like more often than not, the Desecrator doesn't pull his weight because he only has 3 shots with strength 18. We're wounding most tanks that we want to hit. We're hitting most tanks on 2s and winning on 2s, but bigger stuff like the Baneblades and Land Raiders and other knights are winning on 3s. So just mathematically, if we don't roll hot but we don't roll garbage, we're missing one shot there. And a lot of our bigger stuff that we're shooting at will also have an invulnerable save or has access to an Armor of Contempt or something. So they are going to be getting a save still and can potentially just eat another one of those shots, especially if we're going to another knight or something. They will use their Rotate Iron Shields to get to a 4-up invulnerable save, which means they are mathematically eating one of those 2 shots of sending into them. And then even if we roll max damage, we're only dealing 9, which isn't enough to bracket other knights, and it won't be enough to take down a Land Raider, or won't be enough to take down a Baneblade or any Banehole. Not that they're super common, but it's just, even if you're shooting a War Dog, if you're shooting an allied War Dog or an allied Canis Rex, you're not taking him down in one round of shooting unless you roll hot. And I don't like to play around statistical. I like to play around the average, expecting my stuff to either do badly or do middle, like the middle ground, because in my opinion, a lot of the skill from this list comes from making the dice not matter. So something like this that requires me to hit and get through with only 3 attacks just isn't consistent enough for me to consider it to be a solid option in a competitive sense. The spoiler, I did test him a bit. He kind of gets into the point where we're running our anti-tank option with the thermal cannon. I may as well just run a Rampager as the kind of experience I had a lot of the time. The rapid fire battle cannon is funny and it's good into space marines and stuff, but again, the ranges where he starts becoming effective, I may as well just run a Rampager, is what it feels like, and get more consistent results out of it for less points, since a Despoiler comes in at 430, which is more expensive than even the Lancer. And then looking at the other Cerastus Knights, the Arcarion, sadly, his ability is funny, making War Dogs get to Force Battle Shock. It effectively gives Lord of Dread to War Dogs within 6, but his own thing isn't worth it. And then like having a Flamer on the big knight is fun, but them not being able to Overwatch means it's just not really worth us taking after those changes. Same with the Castigator. For 445 points, you may as well take a Gatling Cannon to Spoiler and get the exact same profile of more shots. I think it loses Twin Linked, but we can take double the amount of shots and lose Twin Linked. And the sustain hits is good. Like when I've been testing it, I have made a Brigand kill Angron in Overwatch with it, because like, hey, look at that, the funny 6/6 Thermal Spear turned into 4 shots. But for 445 points, we still have better options, I feel. Then going to our War Dogs, though. The War Dog Brigand, my list personally is an immediate 3 of using Havoc multi-launchers. Even with the indirect fire change, they're still worth it because we can spread battle shocks around really, really quickly and start getting people to just roll dice at us. But the Brigands, they're the bread and butter, the best War Dog. They hit on 2s, they wound most of their targets on 3s, and they get bonus AP if they're shooting the closest target. Like the Avenger Chain Cannon is an excellent anti-infantry option that will just shred through light infantry. And while it may not be the greatest thing into Space Marines, you're still going to minimum kill 3 or 4 Space Marines and then get them to start rolling battle shocks, which would turn all our other stuff on. Then when you account for our stratagems, you can also give 2 of your Brigands sustain hits if they're provided they're shooting the same target. Which, speaking of that, we also take our other big War Dog, the War Dog Carnivore. So on my list personally, only one of these has a Havoc multi-launcher. I'd recommend taking a multi-launcher on all of them. I don't, because 2 of my Carnivores were built for 9th edition and I don't feel like ripping guns off my models. What have I gone wrong? I forgot to delete something. Yes, I've got to delete this. That's Creator. There we go. So Carnivores, same deal. They are one of the best War Dogs. They move 14 inches, so they are faster than the other armagers, and then they get rerolls to charge as their unit ability. So they are our main melee focused War Dog. Compared to the other stuff, we've got like a Huntsman. It's not at all worth taking in my opinion. Like the Huntsman is the middle of the road, just bad version of a Carnivore and a Brigand. If you're going to take a Huntsman, just take a Stalker. His rule's better. You do have an extra character which gives up Assassinate, but frankly, like, you're playing Chaos Knights. If you're giving up Max Bring It Down anyway, if someone wants to go for Bring It Down and Assassinate, we can probably still, like, the game becomes playing around what we can do as our secondaries and just assume that you've gotten the write-off there with their secondaries. Moirax, again, is fun. He's a silly unit. I've run one personally in the past just because it's fun, but it's just not good, sadly. His weapon options don't make up for being 160 points, especially when a Brigand's 10 points more and a Carnivore's 20 points less. And like, as comedy gold as double lightning locks can be, it's just sadly not at all worth bringing. And free Heroic Intervention, it was more relevant when Heroic Intervention costs 2, but he's not a melee war dog. Like, even if you take the Red Cleansers and the melee options he has, it's not worth taking over a Carnivore when you can spend, especially now that Heroic Intervention only costs 1 CP. Same goes for the Executioner. He is our equivalent of a Helvren, but the really important part is that there's a massive difference between the Executioner and the Helvren that takes a Loyalist Helvren to being really, really good and an Executioner being barely playable. Is a Helvren gets anti-fly. We do not get that. Like, during like the meta where we saw heaps and heaps of Katans and Hypercrypt running around, if I could run 6 Helvrens, I would. But we do not have access to that anti-fly. The Execution is +1 to wound, I think it is, against the against below half strength targets. Rarely ever comes up. Like, it feels like it does not at all pull its weight, especially for 140 points. Just take Carnivores. Like, it doesn't have the Carnivore doesn't have the range, but if you got the points for it, take a Brigand instead for shooting, or just take a Carnivore for the same points, and it would do its job way more effectively than this thing half-assing its job. So we'll clear that. Going to allies. Allied units, demons, fucking out the wazoo. There is a million different demons we can take. The auto take in Leviathan was just taking the 3 units of 3 Nurgling bases because they could do actions, but they can't do actions anymore. So what I've been opting to do, and what I've been testing out this weekend, is we are taking a unit of Plague Bearers, if I can find them in here. And we'll go through here first. So Plague Bearers have sticky objectives, which means that we can get the Aura of Terror, which we still have, but then we also have the option to deep strike an OC 2 per model unit and take a backfield objective, or take an objective that our opponent may not have been paying attention to, and then sticking that when they don't have resources dedicated to that portion of the board. And then also, if we look at our war gear options, the which does it say it in here? It appears it does not, but we can go to over here. Here we go. These guys have the Demonic Icon, which makes it a little harder from the Battle Shock, but the Instrument of Chaos, +1 to charge as well, means that we can set them up and get a 8-inch charge and run onto an objective or something like that if our opponent has something on an objective that we want, especially with us them being OC2. Depending on what we've done, and plus Chaos Knight's forcing people to Battle Shock, and we want to get everything below starting strength if we can get it below starting strength, we should out-OC most units short of stuff having banners with just the Plague Bearers alone. And their profiling melee isn't bad. Like, they have their Plague Sword, so it's 2 attacks each, weapon skill 3, strength 4 isn't amazing, but we have lethal hits. So we have that chance with that 20 attacks we're getting to cut through that level of randomization entirely, and we'll get the average number of lethal hits through, and then we can hit we hit Marines on 4s, and we hit Guardsmen and Eldar and stuff like that on 3s. With plus the AP -1, you can do a surprising amount of damage to like your Space Marines and stuff like that, and again get them below that starting strength, so our Chaos Knights can force them to roll Battle Shocks and stuff, and they can lose that objective for us to then sticky with the Plague Bearers. Then the other stuff, so because the Plague Bearers are battle line, we can then chuck in a Beast of Nurgle, who I absolutely love, and I took him all through Leviathan. After the initial demons change, at least, I took a Beast of Nurgle all through Leviathan, and it's because he is on a little 60mm base. It's about the size of 3 Nurglings as it used to be, and he's OC2, which means he can take objectives and you can just rapid ingress him in the backfield. But then the big important bit is this rule here, Grotesque Regeneration. The Beast of Nurgle is a T9 7 wound model that is going to just pop up in your opponent's backfield, and there has been more times than once where my opponent's got a Space Marines or something at it, and I'm like, cool, do you have anything else that's worth you're going to shoot at that thing? He's like, no, cool, I'm not putting away stars next to it. You just gain all the wounds back at the end of every single phase, which means that your opponent to actually deal with this guy to stop you from doing actions or stop you from taking backfield objectives has to shift firepower back to the back of the board, or they have to roll hot shooting into it, which is not a position someone wants to be in when you have three carnivores, a rampager, and a lancer running at you. And then, of course, because we do have exactly 40 points left, squatted neglings. They can't do actions anymore, but they do still give out the -1 to hit. And they are infiltrators, which means we can use them to potentially block out enemy scout units. We can use rapid ingress shenanigans to put them in positions to just be a pain in the ass for enemy, like deep strikers and enemy reinforcements. So that's about it for this list construction specifically. I have seen people take, just quick mention of the other popular allies, I have seen people taking blue horrors recently and taking a changeling, which is cool. Like, they do work, and they work really well. Blue horrors and pink horrors are a huge pain in the ass to pick up without putting dedicated firepower into them. But personally, I like the utility Plague Bearers provide with the sticky objectives, and because I'm taking Nurgle units, I can't then take my Tzeentch units as well. So, well, I can, but it becomes to a point where I need to take a Tzeentch battle line as well as this 100-point Nurgle battle line to get access to the Changeling. And at that stage, it's getting to the point where I'm biting into the points that I would be spending on Knights instead. So, overall, that is the list as I've built currently. That's what I would take, and that's my decision making going into that list. And I guess I will post an update after the event, and we'll see how we go. But yeah, thanks guys. Do the YouTube things, like and subscribe, and hopefully we can start getting some more consistent content coming.